Hey folks, Kevin here. Well, it's October 5th, 2018, and this is another episode of Ask Me Anything. Recently I posted a video about turning the small compost pile from this 2018 year. And that was the final turning. And I gave some insights as far as temperature ranges and duration of maintaining the compost in that range, the materials within the compost pile within that range, in order to safely eliminate weed seeds and pathogens. And recently, Kate Cortez asked, Kevin, very informative, thanks. Do you add garden waste or kitchen scraps to your compost? Although I've watched you turn your piles often, I don't recall ever seeing you build one up of your piles. Just curious how you balance the carbon to nitrogen, or if you just simply go by temp. If it's not hot enough, just add more of X, Y, or Z. Well, great question, Kate. Yes, typically all of our garden waste, all of our garden materials, all of our weed material, all of our kitchen scraps either go to one of two systems. Now this is typical, this year's a little bit different, but typically they either go directly into the composting piles. And when I'm using the term composting piles, I'm talking about aerobic decomposition of organic materials by maintaining the temperature range within that, let's say 135 to 160 degrees Fahrenheit for several days at a time with several turnings, and I've gone over that before. That way, that eliminates weed seeds and eliminates pathogens. And it actually decomposes many of the things that we worry about that could potentially harm us health-wise, not just pathogens, but genetically modified foods and all. Now, we don't bring those on site, but I never know if somebody's had some genetically modified food materials that got sent in with the material that we pick up from Purpose Farm. So either the kitchen scraps or garden waste goes right into our aerobic decomposition system, our composting piles. So when you see these piles, there's lots of other materials. If a chicken passes away, it goes into the pile. All those things go into the pile. Now, the other system that we use, like during the winter months, while everything's frozen, it's got snow over those composting piles, all of that material goes into our vermicomposting system, which is basically just red wiggler worm towers of organic material that the red wiggler worms break down. And people will hear about worm castings. So you get exudates from this material, you get worm castings, you get red wiggler worms, and you also get the decomposition, the composting, vermicomposting of the organic materials that you put into the system. And as long as you're careful and you've worked with the red wigglers for a while and you stay on top of them, they typically do great. So those are the two systems that I usually put everything in. Now this year is a little bit different because we're using all of that organic material to help seal Pond 5 this year. So besides using cardboard and paper products and sediment from the canal systems, all the weeds, all of the plant material. Once I harvest all the tomatoes off the tomato plants, the plants go in there. When I harvest the ears of corn off the corn stalks go over there. Now, typically those would all go into the composting system, but this year is a little bit different. Historically, I have done decomposition of many different materials. So I've had just basically sole wood chip piles and get them up to 125, 130 degrees Fahrenheit. But they aren't there. That material, once it decomposes, is not aerobic thermophilic composting. So it's not what I call compost. It's decomposed organic material. So there will be some weed seeds, and there could be some viable roots from quackgrass or from bindweed that haven't died as a result. So those are our slow soil systems that we do here on site. But, and I've also, as far as regular aerobic composting, similar to the videos that you've seen, last year I did a weed series where I disassembled some keyhole gardens that were all loaded with rocks that as the retaining walls, and it was right over here in this garden here. I took those all of that material out of this area, and when I did take the material out, there were weeds that were over 6 foot tall and big root masses and lots of root material. Well, I did a large composting system last year, and that organic material is what we grew all of our vegetables, our produce on this year. So we took weeds and broke that down. And the weeds, when they get to full maturity, they probably have a pretty close to ideal carbon to nitrogen ratio. To touch on the carbon to nitrogen ratio, I think that's a really good place for people to start off with, is understanding what materials are relatively high in carbon relative to nitrogen, and which materials are relatively high in nitrogen relative to carbon. There's quite a safe range of ratio carbon to nitrogen that one can successfully, if it's mixed appropriately, successfully do composting. And I am referring to aerobic thermophilic composting, as you've seen done in these videos. Otherwise, when we pile the material, like some gardeners will pile the materials, take all their kitchen scraps and materials and maybe some grass clippings and all that, or materials from their flats from starting seeds, all of those sorts of things, put them in a great big pile, maybe in a pallet type composting system, and let it sit there for a year and decompose. And that's great material. It's just not devoid of weed seeds. And if there was something, let's say you had some chicken that was contaminated with E. coli, well, that would still be in that composting material as well. So those are just to differentiate, so you're aware of how I approach these composting systems. So I think having a carbon to nitrogen relative ratio and understanding of those concepts allows one to become successful composting. That, along with understanding moisture content, temperature ranges, and turning of the piles. So those are several key aspects to being successful. Hank, please. So I hope that answers those questions. I've done lots of other composting systems in the past, cardboard and paper, and I'm talking about full-blown aerobic composting, and it's been successful. It's just much more labor intensive, and I find a greater need for doing right now sealing ponds for the cardboard and paper products, using that resource in those areas. If I had a lot more of it, yes, I'd be composting it. And that takes more time, and there's more effort, and it really requires great attention to the mixing process with the relative size or proportions of cardboard and paper products to the other manures or decomposing hay, silage materials and all. So that's more challenging. So right now I'm not doing that, and I need those resources for sealing the ponds. What else? I think that covers most of the materials and answers the question. No, I'm not highly focused on the carbon to nitrogen ratios. I'm really blessed that the material that we're getting from Purpose Farm has so many different species of manures mixed in. They even have a camel now, so they got camels, alpacas, pigs, donkeys, horses, chickens, goats, peacocks, turkeys. What else? I know I'm missing several other animal species there. And the animals, they're a volunteer organization, so their hay isn't really utilized to its fullest extent when they put it out for the horses. It's picked up. Sometimes there'll be entire bales of hay or straw that's given to me for composting. But often there's, if I bring home 20 loads of compostable materials, probably only 10 loads of it is the manure. The other 10 loads is probably all the hays and straws and other plant materials as well. So I think that's about right, and other bedding materials. So if you have more questions about the composting systems, or if there's specific topics you want me to go over with composting, I'd be happy to do that in the future as well. We've been a little bit crazy around here lately, but I certainly do appreciate everyone's contributions by leaving comments and asking questions. And thank you very much, Kate. I appreciate it. So if you thought this video was of value, please give us a thumbs up, share it with your friends, hit the bell icon if you want to be notified when we post more videos. And certainly, folks, have a super fantastic day. Bye-bye now.